My parents drained my entire future to pay for my brother's wedding, then told me to figure it out myself. I vanished for 7 years, building a fortune they knew nothing about. Now they're on my doorstep, begging for help, oblivious to the trap I'm about to spring. This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The fever had been burning through me for 2 days straight, leaving me shivering under 3 layers of quilts on my living room sofa. My head felt like it was stuffed with cotton, and every joint in my body ached with a dull, throbbing persistence. It was the kind of flu that makes you feel incredibly small and childishly vulnerable, the kind that makes you instinctively wish for a mother's cool hand on your forehead, even if you haven't felt that touch in nearly a decade. I was drifting in and out of a restless sleep, the sound of the rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my penthouse serving as a rhythmic lullaby. My apartment, usually my sanctuary of silence and order, felt cavernous and cold. I had just managed to close my eyes, hoping to escape the nausea for a few hours, when the buzzing of the intercom sliced through the quiet like a physical blow. I groaned, burying my face deeper into the pillow. "Go away," I whispered to the empty room, my voice raspy and weak. The buzzing came again, insistent, angry. I forced myself up, wrapping the heavy duvet around my shoulders like a cape. I shuffled to the wall monitor, my vision swimming slightly. I expected it to be a delivery, or perhaps the doorman letting me know about a package. I pressed the button to activate the camera feed, blinking to clear the blurriness from my eyes. The image flickered into focus, and my breath hitched in my throat. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Standing in the sleek gray lobby of my building, looking wet, ragged, and utterly out of place, were Nancy and Robert, my parents. I hadn't seen them in 7 years, not since the day I packed a single duffel bag and walked out of their lives without looking back. They looked older, much older. Robert's shoulders, usually squared with an unearned arrogance, were slumped. Nancy, who never left the house without a full face of makeup and perfectly coiffed hair, looked disheveled, her mascara smudged beneath eyes that were red and swollen. I stared at the screen, my hand hovering over the talk button, shaking uncontrollably. It wasn't the fever shaking me now, it was a cocktail of adrenaline, rage, and a sudden, piercing fear. How did they find me? I had covered my tracks. I had changed my number, my address, everything but my name. "Chloe," Nancy's voice crackled through the speaker, tinny and distorted. She was looking right into the camera, and for a second, it felt like she was looking right into my soul. "Chloe, please, we know you're up there. The doorman said you were home." I didn't answer, I couldn't. "It's your brother," Robert said, his voice gruff, cracking in a way I had never heard before. He leaned in closer to the camera, his desperation palpable even through the grain of the video. "It's Liam. He's in trouble, Chloe, bad trouble. We didn't know where else to go." Liam, of course, it was always Liam. I should have left them there. I should have told the doorman to escort them off the premises. I should have gone back to my couch, nursed my fever, and let the past stay buried. But the mention of his name, spoken with such terrified reverence by my father, ignited a cold spark in my chest. It cut through the fever haze. I pressed the button. "4th floor," I said, my voice sounding foreign to my own ears. "The elevator code is 4490. I unlocked the door and retreated to the middle of the living room, clutching the duvet tighter. When they walked in, soaking wet and shivering, they brought the smell of rain and old memories with them. They stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes widening as they took in the luxury of my apartment, the modern art, the marble countertops, the view of the city skyline through the rain-streaked glass. They looked at the apartment, then at me, and finally really saw me. But they didn't ask how I was. They didn't ask why I was wrapped in a blanket at 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. They didn't ask about the last 7 years. "Oh, thank God," Nancy sobbed, stepping forward as if to hug me, then stopping when she saw the look in my eyes. "Thank God you're here. We've been so worried." You haven't called in 7 years, I said, the words scraping my throat. You weren't worried, you were absent. We didn't know how to reach you, she protested weakly, wringing her hands. That was the point, I replied. I gestured vaguely to the sofas. Sit down, tell me why you're here, and then leave, I'm sick. Why sat on the edge of my pristine white leather sofa, looking like frightened children. Robert cleared his throat, unable to meet my gaze. We need help, Chloe, he said, staring at his wet shoes. Financial help and legal help. We heard you're some kind of accountant now. Forensic accountant, I corrected, sharpness returning to my mind. Right, he nodded. Well, Liam, he's been accused of something terrible, embezzlement, fraud. They're talking about prison, Chloe, years in prison. Nancy let out a fresh wail, burying her face in her hands. My baby boy, she moaned. They're going to destroy him. I looked at them, two people who had thrown me to the wolves to keep their precious son warm, and I felt a strange, terrifying calm settle over me. The betrayal was worse than the diagnosis itself, because even now, standing in my home, witnessing my success, they didn't see a daughter. They saw a resource. They saw a life raft for Liam. I walked to the kitchen island, needing to put physical distance between us. My legs felt like lead, but I forced myself to move with deliberate grace. I poured 3 glasses of water, my movements mechanical. I needed a moment to process the absurdity of the scene. My parents, the people who had essentially disowned me for being too difficult when I demanded fair treatment, were now sitting in my multi-million-dollar apartment, dripping rainwater onto my rug, asking me to save the golden child who had been the cause of it all. I carried the water back and set the glasses down on the coffee table. Nancy reached for hers immediately, her hands trembling so hard the water sloshed over the rim. He didn't do it, of course, Nancy said hurriedly, taking a gulp. It's a misunderstanding. You know Liam, he's not. He's not good with details. He has a big heart, he's a visionary, but he gets confused with the paperwork. His partners, they set him up. We're sure of it. Who are his partners? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I sat in the armchair opposite them, keeping the duvet wrapped tight, a physical barrier against their emotional manipulation. Some investment firm, Robert said, waving a hand dismissively. It doesn't matter. The point is his assets are frozen, everything, the house, the cars, the bank accounts. Hannah, she's beside herself. She's staying with her parents, but she can't access any money either. Hannah is his wife? I asked. I remembered Hannah. We had gone to high school together. She was vapid, status-obsessed, and perfect for Liam. Yes, Nancy said impatiently. They have 2 children now, Chloe, your niece and nephew. Think of them. My niece and nephew. Children I didn't know existed. Children whose grandmother hadn't bothered to tell me about when they were born. So, let me get this straight, I said, leaning back. Liam is being investigated for fraud. His assets are frozen, and you want me to, what? Pay his legal fees, post bail. We need you to look at the books, Robert said, leaning forward, his eyes pleading. You do this for a living, right? You find lost money, you prove fraud, we need you to prove he's innocent. And, well, we've exhausted our savings paying the retainer for his defense attorney. We need a loan, just until this blows over, just until he gets his settlement. A loan, I repeated flatly. He's your brother, Nancy whispered, tears leaking from her eyes again. Family helps family. We know we haven't been perfect. But when the chips are down, blood matters. You're the capable one, Chloe. You've always been the strong one, the independent one. Liam needs you. That phrase, the independent one. It echoed in my head, bouncing off the walls of my memory, triggering a headache so sharp I almost winced. It was the same phrase she had used 7 years ago. It was her weapon of choice, a way to dress up neglect as a compliment. I looked at Nancy's face, the soft, pleading eyes that masked a core of iron selfishness. I looked at Robert, a man who had never stood up for me once in my life. They were looking at me with hope, thinking they had played the right card. They thought they were appealing to my vanity, to my desire to be the good daughter who saves the day. They saw the apartment. They saw the expensive furniture. They assumed I had money to burn and a heart waiting to be unlocked. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. They had forgotten that I wasn't just an accountant who balanced checkbooks. I was a forensic accountant. My entire career, my entire fortune, was built on hunting down liars. I didn't just find money, I found secrets. I found the digital footprints people thought they had deleted. I found the offshore accounts, the shell companies, and the hidden transactions. If Liam was in trouble for fraud and they were inviting me to look at the books, they weren't asking for a savior. They were handing the murder weapon to the detective. I see, I said softly, a plan was already forming in the back of my feverish mind, cold and precise. You want me to review his financial records to prove his innocence? Yes, Nancy cried out, relief washing over her face. Exactly, we have the hard drives. We brought them. His lawyer said we shouldn't show anyone but your family. Robert reached into his wet coat pocket and pulled out a black external hard drive. He placed it on the table like it was a holy relic. I stared at the black plastic box. It contained the truth. It contained the leverage I had been waiting 7 years for. Leave it, I said, and leave me your contact info. I'll look at it when I'm feeling better. They stood up, profusely thankful, babbling about how they knew I would do the right thing. As they left, Nancy paused at the door. I knew you'd help, she said, smiling that same beatific, maddening smile. You're a good girl, Chloe. I closed the door and locked it. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood, listening to the elevator whisk them away. Then, I turned back to the empty room. My fever seemed to have vanished, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. They thought I was the independent one. They were about to find out just how independent I really was. To understand why that hard drive sitting on my coffee table felt like a ticking bomb, you have to understand the night I died to them. It was 7 years ago. I was 22, a senior in college working 3 jobs, barista in the morning, library aide in the afternoon, and tutoring in the evening just to keep my head above water. I was exhausted, constantly stressed, and surviving on ramen and caffeine. But I had a light at the end of the tunnel. My grandfather, God rest his soul, had left a specific education trust for me and Liam. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough to cover tuition for a master's degree. I had been accepted into a prestigious forensic accounting program in Chicago. It was my dream. It was my ticket out of the struggle. I had come home for a weekend dinner, excited to share the acceptance letter. I sat at the dining room table, the same table where I'd done my homework for years, clutching the envelope. Liam was there, of course. He was 25 then, between jobs as usual, but driving a leased BMW my parents paid for. He was glowing, swirling a glass of expensive red wine. Big news, Robert had announced before I could even open my mouth. Liam and Hannah are finally setting a date. That's great, I had said, trying to be happy for him. Actually, I have news too. I got into. And not just any date, Nancy interrupted, her eyes sparkling. They're getting married in Tuscany, a full week at a villa. It's going to be a fairy tale. I froze. Tuscany, that sounds expensive. Liam laughed, a sound that always grated on my nerves, smug, relaxed, the laugh of a man who has never paid a bill in his life. Quality costs, Chloe, you know me, go big or go home. We want to give him the best start, Nancy cooed, reaching over to squeeze Liam's hand. Hannah's family is very prominent, you know. We have to match their contribution. A cold pit formed in my stomach. Mom, Dad, how are you paying for a destination wedding in Italy? You always said money was tight. Robert cleared his throat and took a long sip of wine. He didn't look at me. Well, he began, we had to move some assets around. We liquidated the education trust. The room went silent. The ticking of the grandfather clock seemed to boom like thunder. You, what? I whispered. But that's for school, that's for my master's, I just got in. We know, honey, Nancy said, her tone dismissive, as if I had complained about a broken fingernail. But Liam needs this now. "You're so smart, Chloe, you can get loans, or work another year and save up. You've always been the independent one. You figure things out. Liam? Well, Liam needs a little more support." I looked at Liam. He wasn't even embarrassed. He was smirking, looking at his wine, bored by my distress. "It's just money, Chloe," he said, waving his hand. "Don't be jealous, it's ugly." "Jealous?" I stood up, my chair scraping violently against the floor. "I worked 3 jobs while you partied for 4 years. That money was Grandpa's gift to both of us." "And we decided this was the best use for it," Robert snapped, slamming his hand down. "Don't be selfish, Chloe. Your brother is getting married. Be happy for him." "Selfish," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "I'm selfish." I looked at them, really looked at them. I saw the dynamic that had ruled my entire life. Liam, the sun around which their world revolved, could burn everything down and they would thank him for the warmth. I was just the satellite, expected to stay in orbit, silent and cold. "I'm not being selfish," I said, my voice shaking with a rage so profound it felt like grief. "I'm being done." I walked out that night. I didn't go to the wedding. I took out predatory loans to fund my master's. I ate toast for dinner for 2 years. I missed holidays. I ignored their guilt-tripping voicemails. I became the best forensic accountant in the city because I was driven by an engine of pure spite. And Liam, from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, the business he started after the wedding failed. Then another one, then another. He was a visionary, an entrepreneur, which is code for unemployed with an ego. He wore tailored suits to pitch meetings for apps that didn't exist. He leased cars he couldn't afford to impress people he didn't like. He was a hollow man, filled with my parents' enabling. And now, looking at the hard drive on my table, I knew exactly what I was going to find. You don't get accused of embezzlement because of a paperwork error. You get accused because you stole. My phone buzzed. It was Hannah, my Hannah. My best friend since freshman year of college, the one who had let me sleep on her floor when I couldn't afford rent, the one who was now a shark of a defense attorney. "Hey," she said, her voice sharp. "I saw your parents leaving your building. Please tell me you didn't let them in." "I did better than that," I said, picking up the hard drive. "I took the case." "Chloe," she warned, "don't get dragged back in." "I'm not getting dragged in, Han," I said, plugging the drive into my secure laptop. "I'm the one closing the net." I didn't sleep that night. The fever had broken, replaced by a cold, clinical focus that I hadn't felt since my last major case involving a Ponzi scheme in the Hamptons. I made a pot of black coffee, strong enough to wake the dead, and set up my workstation on the dining table. The hard drive Robert had left behind was a chaotic mess. It wasn't organized. It was a digital dumping ground. Thousands of PDFs, unlabeled spreadsheets, and scanned receipts were scattered across folders with names like MISC, Stuff, and 2024. It was typical of a man who thought details were beneath him. Liam had always believed that if he just talked fast enough and smiled bright enough, the numbers would magically align. I started by cloning the drive. Rule number 1 of forensics: never work on the original evidence. Then, I began the tedious process of structuring the data. I imported his bank statements into my analytics software, flagging every transaction over $1,000. For the first 3 hours, it looked like standard incompetence. Liam had been running a boutique investment firm, Prestige Capital, which apparently managed portfolios for mid-level wealthy clients, doctors, dentists, small business owners. The operating account was bleeding money. Lease payments on a luxury office space downtown, 5-figure client entertainment dinners, and travel expenses that seemed excessive even for high finance. But around 4:00 a.m., the pattern emerged. It's never the big numbers that give you away. It's the small, repetitive ones. I noticed a recurring monthly payment to a vendor listed as Apex Solutions LLC for IT consulting and server maintenance. The amounts varied slightly. One month, $4,800 the next, just enough to look like variable billing, but always under the $5,000 threshold that might trigger an automatic audit in some banking systems. I cross-referenced Apex Solutions LLC. No website, no LinkedIn presence. The business address listed on the invoices was a P.O. box in a strip mall in Nevada. I dug deeper. I pulled the metadata from the invoices Liam had saved. The author of the PDF documents wasn't an IT company. The metadata tag read, HM Personal. Hannah Miller, his wife. My stomach turned. This wasn't just bad management. This was embezzlement 101. Liam was paying his own wife for IT services that didn't exist, siphoning investor money directly into a shell company. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. Once I pulled the thread, the whole sweater unraveled. There were payments to R&N Associates for advisory services. $2,000 a month, like clockwork, for the last 3 years. I traced the routing number. It was a joint checking account at a local credit union. The account holders, Robert and Nancy. I sat back in my chair, the silence of the apartment pressing down on me. My hands were trembling, not from sickness, but from rage. My parents weren't just enabling him emotionally, they were on the payroll. They were living off the stolen money. That's how they had afforded their new car, their renovations, their comfortable retirement. They were complicit. Suddenly, their desperation at my door made terrifying sense. They weren't crying because Liam was going to prison. They were crying because if the authorities audited Prestige Capital and found R&N Associates, they were going down with him. They didn't want me to prove his innocence. They wanted me to use my skills to hide the money before the forensic team from the prosecution found it. They wanted me to be their cleaner. I picked up my phone. It was 6:00 a.m. I dialed Han, my attorney friend, not my sister-in-law. She answered on the second ring, her voice groggy. "Chloe, it's 6 in the morning. Are you okay?" "I need you to run a background check on a shell company in Nevada," I said, my voice flat. "And I need you to find out who the lead investigator is on the Liam Miller case." "Chloe, I told you not to." "I'm not saving him, Han," I cut her off. "I'm gathering ammunition. They're trying to use me to obstruct justice. I need to know exactly how deep the water is before I push them in." Han paused. I could hear the rustle of sheets as she sat up. "Okay, send me the details, but Chloe, be careful. If they're desperate enough to show up after 7 years, they're desperate enough to do anything." "I know," I said, looking at the spreadsheet where my parents' names sat next to the stolen funds. "That's what I'm counting on." 2 days later, I summoned them. I didn't invite them for dinner. I didn't offer to go to their house. I sent a text to my father, "Review complete. Bring Liam and Hannah. Come to my office at 10:00 a.m. Do not be late." I rented a conference room in a high-end, shared workspace downtown. It was neutral ground, intimidated by glass walls and polished mahogany. I wanted them to feel small. I wanted them to feel the weight of the professional world they were mocking with their fraud. I arrived 30 minutes early, setting up a projector and a stack of printed dossiers. I wore my court armor, a sharp, charcoal suit, stilettos, and zero jewelry. They arrived at 9:55. My parents looked hopeful, clutching each other's hands. Hannah, my sister-in-law, wore oversized sunglasses and a designer trench coat that probably cost more than my first car. And then there was Liam. He looked terrible, yet somehow still projected an air of unearned confidence. He was unshaven, his eyes darting around the room, but he walked with that same swagger, the one that said he expected the world to bend for him. "Chloe," Nancy exclaimed, rushing forward as if to hug me. I held up a hand. "Sit." The warmth in the room evaporated. They awkwardly took the seats on the opposite side of the long table. I stood at the head, the projector remote in my hand. "So," Liam started, leaning back and crossing his arms. "Mom said you're gonna fix this mess. I told them it's just a mix-up with the accountants, but you know how panic-prone they are." "A mix-up," I repeated, my voice echoing slightly in the glass room. "Yeah, some compliance thing," Liam waved his hand dismissively. "The investors are getting skittish because the market is down. They're trying to pin their losses on mismanagement. It's a witch hunt. I see. I pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind me lit up. It displayed a massive, complex flow chart I had spent the last 24 hours building. It showed money leaving Prestige Capital and flowing into 3 distinct reservoirs. I analyzed the hard drive, I said calmly. You were right, Liam. The books are a mess, but they aren't messy because of incompetence. They're messy because of Apex Solutions, LLC. The air left the room. Hannah stiffened in her chair, her sunglasses hiding her eyes, but I saw her jaw clench. Liam's smirk faltered. I don't know what that is, Liam lied, but his voice cracked. Really? I clicked the remote. A scanned invoice appeared, magnified. Because the metadata on the invoices lists the author as A. Chempersonal, and the IP address used to upload them matches the Wi-Fi at your home address. I looked at Hannah. You're charging the investors $4,000 a month for IT services. Tell me, Hannah, do you know how to configure a server? Do you know what SQL injection is? I helped with the website, Hannah stammered, her face flushing red. $72,000 for a Wix website? I raised an eyebrow. That's fraud, Hannah. That's grand larceny. Now wait a minute. Robert stood up, his face turning blotchy. You're supposed to be helping us. Why are you attacking them? Everyone pads expenses a little, Chloe. That's business. Padding expenses is ordering a steak dinner, I said, my voice turning to ice. Funneling investor capital into a shell company is a felony. It was a loan, Liam shouted, slamming his hand on the table. I was going to pay it back. I just had a liquidity crunch. And what about R&N Associates? I asked softly. The room went dead silent. Robert slowly sat back down. Nancy turned pale, her hand flying to her mouth. I clicked the remote again. A list of monthly transfers appeared. Prestige Capital to R&N Associates, $2,000. Prestige Capital to R&N Associates, $2,000. Mom, Dad, I said, looking them in the eye. Did you know that the allowance Liam was giving you was coming directly from his clients' retirement funds? He told us it was dividends, Nancy cried out, tears spill. Over. He said the business was booming. He said he wanted to share the success. It doesn't matter what he said, I replied. You accepted $24,000 a year from a fraudulent entity. In the eyes of the law, you are beneficiaries of a crime. You are accomplices. You have to fix it, Liam hissed, leaning over the table, his eyes wild. You're the expert. Cook the books, hide the transfers, reclassify them as consulting fees, make it look legitimate. You want me to commit a felony for you? I asked, genuinely curious about the depth of his delusion. I'm your brother, he screamed. You owe me, you walked away, you left us. You have all this money, this fancy life, and you didn't share a dime. I stayed, I took care of them, I deserve this money. You didn't take care of them, I said, gesturing to our terrified parents. You implicated them. You bought their loyalty with stolen cash, and now you've put them in the line of fire to save yourself. You're just jealous, Liam spat, his face twisted in ugly, familiar resentment. You've always been jealous that they loved me more. That's what this is. You're enjoying this. I'm not enjoying it, I said, closing the laptop. I'm ending it. The meeting ended in chaos. Liam stormed out, knocking over a chair. Hannah followed him, sobbing into her phone, likely calling her parents to bail her out. My parents stayed behind, looking small and shattered. Chloe, Nancy whispered, reaching across the table. Please, you can't let him go to prison. He won't survive in there, and us, they'll take the house. They'll take everything. You should have thought about that before you spent 7 years cashing checks you didn't earn, I said, pulling away from her touch. I can't stop the investigation, Mom. It's already happening. The feds aren't stupid. They'll find what I found. But you can delay them, Robert pleaded. You can delete the files from the drive, say you lost it, stall them until we can sell the house and pay it back. If I delete evidence, I go to jail too, I said, standing up. Is that what you want? Both of your children in prison? They didn't answer immediately. And that hesitation, that split second where they actually weighed my freedom against Liam's safety, was the final knife in the heart of any lingering affection I had for them. "Get out," I said quietly. "Chloe, get out." They left, defeated and terrified, but the war wasn't over. Over the next 48 hours, the harassment began. Liam sent me a barrage of text messages, alternating between begging for mercy and threatening to ruin my career. He claimed he would tell the police I was the one who advised him on how to structure the shell companies. It was a bluff, a desperate lie, but it showed he was willing to drag me down with him. Then came the legal threat. A letter from a shady strip mall lawyer representing Liam, demanding I return the hard drive and sign a non-disclosure agreement, claiming the data was privileged corporate information. I called Han. "They're rattling cages," Han said, her voice calm over the speakerphone as I paced my living room. "They know they're cornered, but Chloe, there's something else." I dug into the background of the investors Liam defrauded. And one of them is a retired police chief. Another is a widow who put her husband's life insurance into Prestige Capital. Liam didn't just steal from rich people who won't miss it. He gutted vulnerable people's livelihoods. A cold fury settled over me. He told me it was market fluctuations. "It gets worse," Han continued. "I found a flight manifest. Liam and Hannah have tickets to the Cayman Islands booked for next Tuesday, one way." He's running, I realized. He's going to run and leave Mom and Dad to face the music. Exactly. The assets are in Hannah's name, likely offshore already. If he leaves the country, the feds will go after the easiest targets left behind to recoup the losses. That means your parents. They'll seize the house, the car, the accounts. Your parents will be homeless and facing obstruction charges. I walked to the window, looking out at the city rain. I hated my parents for what they did to me. I hated them for that hesitation in the conference room. But the idea of Liam, the golden child, the architect of this disaster, sipping cocktails on a beach while our parents rotted in a cell because of his greed. It was an injustice I couldn't stomach. "He's not leaving," I said. "How are you going to stop him?" Han asked. "The police move slow. They won't have an arrest warrant by Tuesday." "Then I need to speed them up," I said. "There's a family barbecue this Sunday. Hannah's parents are hosting it. It's a bon voyage party disguised as a birthday party for their daughter." "Chloe, don't do anything reckless." "I'm not going to be reckless, Han," I said, grabbing the hard drive. "I'm going to be thorough. I'm going. G to that barbecue, and I'm bringing the projector." "You're going to blow up the family publicly." "There is no family," I said. "There's just a crime scene, and I'm the lead investigator." I hung up. I spent the rest of the weekend finalizing the final dossier. I printed copies of the flight tickets, the shell company documents, and the emails where Liam mocked his own investors. I organized it all into a presentation titled The Exit Strategy. They wanted the independent one to handle it. Fine, I was going to handle it. The Sunday of the barbecue was a perfect, sun-drenched afternoon, the kind of day designed for denials and delusions. Hannah's parents lived in a sprawling estate in the suburbs, a place of manicured lawns and high hedges that screamed old money, or at least the desperate performance of it. I drove my own car, a sleek black sedan I had bought with my first big bonus years ago. It felt like a tank, a protective shell as I rolled up the long gravel driveway. I could see the party in full swing in the backyard, white linen tablecloths, waiters circulating with champagne flutes, and a jazz band playing softly in the corner. It was a grotesque display of wealth for a couple that was technically insolvent and about to flee the country. I didn't knock. I walked through the side gate, carrying my laptop bag and the portable projector I had used in courtrooms to dissect billion-dollar frauds. The chatter died down instantly as I stepped onto the patio. I was the ghost at the feast, the uninvited omen. I was wearing the same sharp suit from the meeting, a visual reminder that while they were partying, I was working. Chloe, Nancy's voice was high and brittle. She was holding a glass of wine with both hands, looking terrified. Robert stood next to her, looking gray and aged. Liam, who had been laughing loudly near the grill with Hannah's father, turned around. His face went from jovial to murderous in a split second. "What are you doing here?" he barked, stepping forward. "This is a private party, get out." "I'm here to give a toast," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the hush of the crowd. "It's a bon voyage party, isn't it? I thought I'd help send you off properly." "Security," Hannah screeched, looking around for the hired help. "Get her out of here, she's crazy." "I wouldn't do that," I said calmly, walking toward the large outdoor television screen mounted above the patio fireplace. I pulled the HDMI cable from the back of the cable box and plugged it into my laptop. "Because the police are already on their way to pick up the guests of honor. If you touch me, you just add assault to the list of federal charges." A murmur of shock rippled through the guests, mostly friends of Hannah's parents, oblivious to the rot beneath the surface. "Chloe, stop," Robert pleaded, stepping toward me. "Don't do this here, not in front of everyone." "You had your chance to stop this in my office, Dad," I said, not looking at him as I keyed in my password. "You chose him, now I'm choosing the truth." I hit enter. The massive screen flickered to life. The title slide of my presentation, the exit strategy, loomed over the garden party in bold, black letters against a red background. "Turn it off." Liam lunged for me, but to my surprise, and perhaps his, Hannah's father, a burly man who had made his money in construction, stepped in his way. He looked confused, but the mention of police had spooked him. "Let her speak, Liam," he grunted. "If it's nonsense, we'll throw her out, but I want to hear why cops are coming to my house." "Thank you, George," I said. I clicked the remote. The first slide appeared, the shell company, Apex Solutions. "For the last 3 years," I began, addressing the crowd like a jury, "Liam and Hannah have been siphoning investor money, your money, perhaps, if anyone here invested in Prestige Capital, into a fake IT company." I clicked through the slides rapidly. The invoices, the metadata proving Hannah created them, the IP addresses, the photos of the empty PO box in Nevada. "That's a lie," Hannah screamed, her face contorted. "I did consulting." "You charged $4,000 for server maintenance on days you were posting Instagram photos from the spa," I countered, flashing a side-by-side comparison of an invoice date and her social media feed. The crowd gasped. I clicked again, the accomplices. The screen showed the transfers to R and N Associates, my parents' names. Nancy let out a sob, dropping her wine glass. It shattered on the patio stones, the sound sharp and final. "My parents," I said, my voice wavering slightly for the first time. "They received $2,000 a month. They were told it was dividends. In reality, it was stolen money. Hush money, effectively, to keep them dependent and blind." "We didn't know," Nancy wailed, looking around at the judging faces of her peers. "We thought he was successful." "And now for the fina." I said, looking directly at my mother. "The reason I'm really here. The reason they're throwing this party." I clicked the remote one last time, the flight manifest. The screen displayed the booking confirmation. 2 tickets, one way, Cayman Islands, departing Tuesday morning. "Liam," I said, pointing at the screen, "is this a business trip?" Liam was silent. He was breathing hard, his eyes darting to the side gate, looking for an exit. "They aren't coming back," I said to my parents. "And look at the passenger list. Liam Miller, Hannah Miller, no Robert, no Nancy." I stepped closer to my father. "They were leaving you, Dad. They were going to fly away to a non-extradition country with the money they stole, and they were going to leave you here to answer the questions. When the feds seized the house, when they asked about R and N Associates, Liam wasn't going to be here to defend you. You were the fall guys." Robert stared at the screen. He stared at the flight numbers. He looked at Liam, his golden boy, the son he had sacrificed my future for. "Liam," Robert's voice was barely a whisper, "is that true? You were leaving us?" "I was going to send for you," Liam shouted, the lie so thin it was transparent. "Once we got settled, I was going to send for you." "With what money?" I snapped. "The accounts are frozen Tuesday morning. I already filed the report with the SEC. You're broke, Liam." Liam looked at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You ruined everything," he hissed. "You always ruin everything, you jealous, miserable bitch." He took a step toward me, his hand raised. But he never made contact. Robert, my passive, enabling father, moved with a speed I didn't know he possessed. He stepped between us and shoved Liam hard in the chest. Liam stumbled back, tripping over a chair and falling onto the perfectly manicured grass. "Don't you touch her," Robert roared, his voice breaking with decades of repressed emotion. "She's the only one who told us the truth. You were going to leave your mother in prison." "Dad, stop," Liam scrambled back, looking terrified of the man he had manipulated for so long. "I gave you everything," Robert screamed, tears streaming down his face. "I stole from her for you, and you were going to leave us to rot." The sound of sirens cut through the air, rising in volume as they approached the front gate. I closed my laptop, the screen went black. "Party S over," I said. The next hour was a blur of flashing lights and Miranda rights. I sat on a garden bench, watching the chaos unfold with a detached sense of finality. Hannah was screaming that her father knew the mayor as they handcuffed her. Liam was weeping, actually weeping, begging his father to tell the police it was a misunderstanding. Robert didn't say a word. He stood with his arm around Nancy, who was sobbing into his shoulder. When the officers approached them, asking about their involvement with R&N Associates, I stepped in. "Officer," I said, flashing my credentials. "I'm the forensic accountant who compiled the evidence. In my report, you'll see I've classified Robert and Nancy as victims of familial fraud. They were unknowingly used as a laundering conduit. They have agreed to cooperate fully and liquidate all assets to pay restitution." Robert looked at me, shock etched on his face. He knew what that meant. They weren't going to jail, but they were going to lose everything else. The house, the cars, the retirement fund, it would all go to the victims. "Thank you, ma'am," the officer said, taking notes. As the squad cars pulled away with Liam and Hannah in the back, the garden was quiet. The guests had fled. It was just me and my parents. They walked over to the bench. They looked like refugees in their own lives, stripped of their illusions, their pride, and their favorite child. "You saved us from prison," Robert said quietly. "I did it because I didn't want the headlines to say my parents were felons," I said coldly. "Not for you." "Chloe," Nancy said, her voice trembling. We are so sorry for everything. The wedding, the college fund. We were so blind. We just wanted him to be happy, and we thought you were strong enough to handle yourself." "I was strong enough," I said, standing up and slinging my bag over my shoulder. "But I shouldn't have had to be. That's the difference." "Can we?" Nancy reached out a hand. "Can we start over? We're going to have to move. Maybe we could come for dinner sometime, get to know you again." I looked at them. I saw the fear in their eyes. They were aging, broke, and alone. They wanted a safety net. They wanted the independent one to take care of them now that the golden child was gone. It would be so easy to say yes, to play the hero, to let them back in and finally get the validation I had craved for 29 years. But I remembered the fever. I remembered the 3 jobs in college. I remembered the 7 years of SILE. "NCA." "No," I said. They flinched as if I had slapped them. "I will help you navigate the bankruptcy," I said. "I will make sure you have a small apartment and food on the table. I won't let you starve, but we are not starting over. You made your choice 7 years ago. You doubled down on it this week. You don't get to have a relationship with me just because your other option is in handcuffs." "Chloe, please," Robert whispered. "You're all we have left." "I know," I said, walking toward the gate. "And that is the consequence of your actions. You have a daughter who will keep you alive, but you don't have a daughter who trusts you." I reached my car and opened the door. I looked back one last time. They were standing in the ruins of the party, holding each other, small figures against the backdrop of a fake empire. "You were right about one thing, Mom," I called out. She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "I am the independent one," I said, "and I like it that way." I got in the car and drove away. The rain had stopped. As I merged onto the highway, heading back to the city, the sun began to set, painting the sky in brilliant hues of purple and gold. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Han. "They're in custody. You did it. Are you okay?" I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with air that felt cleaner than it had in years. I wasn't sick anymore. The fever was gone. The weight was gone. I typed back, "I'm better than okay, I'm free."